Andrew Tate does not just attract attention. For a lot of men, he feels like permission. Permission to want more. Permission to be direct. Permission to stop apologizing for wanting power, respect, and control. And that is why his influence is so strong. Not because every man agrees with him, not because every man admires him, but because for some men, he gives something they have not felt in a long time: relief. And if that sounds strange, it only sounds strange because most people misunderstand what is actually happening here. This is not just about Andrew Tate as a person. It is about what he represents inside the mind of a lot of men. There are men watching him who are not thinking, "I want to become exactly like this guy." They are thinking something quieter, something more personal, something like, "Finally, someone said it. Finally, someone sounds sure. Finally, someone is not asking for permission." That reaction matters. Because once you understand that reaction, you start to understand why his content spreads so easily. A lot of men today feel mentally exhausted, not in the dramatic way people talk about burnout online, something deeper, a low-grade pressure that never really turns off. They are told to be strong, but not too strong, confident, but not intimidating, ambitious, but never selfish, masculine, but only in a way that makes everyone comfortable. So a lot of men grow up with the feeling that whatever they want has to be softened first. Their ambition has to be polite, their hunger has to be tasteful, their masculinity has to be edited. And after a while, that creates a very specific kind of frustration. Not rage exactly, more like self-doubt mixed with resentment. A man starts asking himself, what am I actually allowed to want? How much confidence is too much? How much ambition is too much? How much dominance is acceptable before people start calling me a problem? Those are not small questions. Those questions shape identity. And when identity feels unclear, the brain looks for an external model. It looks for someone who seems to have already answered the questions that feel impossible to answer alone. That is one of the reasons a figure like Andrew Tate becomes psychologically powerful. He does not just present opinions, he presents certainty. And certainty is addictive when you feel uncertain. A man who feels confused about his place in the world does not just want information, he wants direction. He wants a voice that does not hesitate. That is also why the delivery matters so much. It is not only what someone says, it is how sure they sound while saying it. Some men are not even fully buying the message. They are buying the energy behind it, the certainty, the decisiveness, the refusal to apologize for taking up space. And for a man who has spent years trying to be acceptable, that can feel powerful. There's another layer here too, and this one matters even more. Tate does not just seem confident. He seems like someone who has decided what kind of man he is. That sounds simple, but it is actually one of the biggest psychological attractions in modern male content. A lot of men are not struggling because they lack intelligence. They are struggling because they lack a stable identity. They may have discipline in some areas. They may work hard. They may try to improve. But underneath all of that, there is still one question that keeps returning. Who am I supposed to be now? In the past, that question was easier to answer. Men were given more obvious scripts. Be the provider, be the protector, be the builder, be the authority in your domain. Those scripts were imperfect. Some were restrictive, some were outdated, but they were clear. Today, a lot of those scripts are gone, or at least they feel blurred. And when the old model disappears before a new one becomes solid, the result is not freedom for everyone. Sometimes the result is confusion, and confusion is uncomfortable. Most men do not want to sit inside it. They want something to anchor to. So when a man like Andrew Tate appears and speaks with total conviction about strength, money, dominance, discipline, and male power, it does more than entertain. It organizes emotion. It gives shape to feelings that were already there. That is why some men feel strangely energized by his content. It is not always because they agree with every detail. it is because his words make them feel less passive. And that word matters, passive. A lot of men secretly fear that they are living passively, watching, waiting, overthinking, delaying, trying to become confident before taking action, hoping that one day they will suddenly feel ready. Tate's message cuts through that. He often speaks in a way that says, stop waiting, decide, move. Take responsibility. Become the man instead of thinking about becoming the man. For some people, that message is aggressive. For some, it is too blunt. For some, it is completely wrong. But psychologically, you can understand why it lands. Because a lot of men are tired of a language that makes them feel permanently unfinished. They want a language that makes them feel capable. This is where the idea of permission becomes really important. Tate is not just offering a lifestyle. He is offering permission to want things that many men have been taught to downplay. Permission to want status, permission to want winning, permission to care about power, permission to want to be respected, permission to say, without smiling, that being average is not enough. Now, that does not mean all of those desires are healthy in every form. Of course not. But the appeal is not built on perfect morality. The appeal is built on emotional release. He gives men language for feelings they were already carrying around in silence. That is why the reaction to him can be so intense in both directions. Some men hear him and feel inspired. Other men hear him and feel disgusted. But both reactions prove the same thing. He is touching something real. And there is another reason this is so sticky. When a figure becomes polarizing, he becomes easier to remember. The brain notices conflict. The brain notices tension. The brain notices anything that feels socially charged. So even the backlash can increase the pull. If a man already feels isolated, already feels misunderstood, already feels like modern culture has no patience for male ambition, then criticism can make the figure feel even more like an ally. Not because he is necessarily right, but because he feels like resistance. And resistance is powerful. People do not just follow ideas. They follow emotional relief. They follow symbols. They follow signals that make them feel less alone. That is why so many men keep coming back. It is not only the content itself. It is the pattern the content creates in the mind. A man watches, feels charged, feels sharper, feels more awake. Then the video ends, and ordinary life feels flat again. That contrast matters. The reason people return to this kind of content is not always because they are addicted to the person. Sometimes they are addicted to the feeling of certainty the person creates. For a few minutes, they are no longer stuck in self-doubt. They are no longer thinking about what they lack. They are no longer comparing themselves to other men. They feel mentally aligned with a stronger version of themselves. And that is a very hard feeling to give up. But there is also a danger here. Because permission can be useful, and permission can also become a trap. It is useful when it helps a man act. It is dangerous when it only helps him feel. That is the line that matters. A man can consume this type of content and feel more awake, more disciplined, more serious about his life. That is the healthy version. But he can also consume it and mistake emotional stimulation for actual growth. That is the trap. Feeling strong is not the same as becoming strong. Feeling focused is not the same as building a focused life. Feeling dangerous is not the same as becoming disciplined. And that is why the most important question is not whether Andrew Tate is motivating. The most important question is whether the motivation becomes action. Does it push a man to build something real? Does it help him become more honest with himself? Does it make him more responsible, more stable, more deliberate? Or does it just give him a temporary high? That is where the psychology gets serious. Because the real issue is not just one man on a screen. The real issue is what happens when a lot of men feel directionless and then encounter someone who sounds like direction. That is the deeper story here. Not worship, not hatred, not even controversy. The deeper story is that many men are desperate for a frame that helps them interpret themselves. And if a man has no clear frame, he will often borrow one from someone else. That is why Andrew Tate feels like permission. He steps into a gap that already exists. He speaks to uncertainty with certainty. He speaks to hesitation with force. He speaks to frustration with confidence. Whether you like that or not, it works on the mind. And once you see that, you stop asking the wrong question. The wrong question is, why do men like him? The better question is, what feeling is he giving them that they are not getting anywhere else? Because when you answer that question honestly, the whole phenomenon becomes much easier to understand. Andrew Tate is not just a person men watch. He is a permission structure, a fantasy of decisiveness, a mirror for male frustration. And for some men, he is the first voice that makes them feel like wanting more is not something to hide. That is why his influence is bigger than the content itself. And that is why so many men keep watching.